Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again, absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to those even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words HeartLand Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you choose to tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we help people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. And if you have any of those to share with us, we'd greatly appreciate if you do that. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. And or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback, your input. Alternatively, since we're on Zoom these days, if you choose to call in, you can use any of the many numbers that are available for a Zoom call-in to call in from your phone. And once you call in on a Zoom number, if you have unlimited long distance, then the meeting ID for this first hour is 853-2357-4173. 853-2357-4173. And that should let you get in through your phone, and or if you open up a window in your computer, that should let you attend the Zoom meeting, and where you can either share your video and or your audio or not. And as I like to say, we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to share their feedback with us, because it makes it exceedingly easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that is just boatloads easier to do when we get feedback from you, when we know how these things are landing for you, what's working for you and what isn't. And, it comes to me this morning to talk about how repetition is critical to deeper and deeper levels of understanding of material like this. We had somebody in the support group last night who was talking about the benefit of hearing the same kinds of things that she's been um, learning, hearing, and listening to and watching and reading from other sources for the last 30 some years, and hearing it in a slightly different format with a slightly different angle, and how beneficial that is to deeper and richer understanding of the material. And an example of that for me happened as I was listening over the last 2 days. Monday and Tuesday of this week, Michael and Jeanie have been busy with various things around Jeanie's health and the family. So they did a best of show that they published on Podbean. And as I listened to those shows, it's Michael basically doing a workshop. And it reminded me of how I got introduced to Michael's work. A friend of mine from high school had found Michael Ryce's work and sent me a 4-hour audio CD of the what is probably not the original, but one of his early recordings of the workshop titled "Why Is This Happening to Me Again?" And it was the original workshop that contained many, many layers of information. Eventually, it broke off into um, probably 6 or 8 other individual workshops. And in that original 4 hours, one of the things that hit me strongly was when he said, if you're trying to learn something new that is deep, it's rich, and has lots of substance, repetition is important. And even more beneficial is if you can hear the same fundamental truth spoken from a variety of different perspectives. And so in that talk, he was saying, we're going to look at this from a theological perspective. We're going to look at this from a physics perspective. We're going to look at this from a psychological perspective. We're going to look at this from a human relationships perspective. And as you look at a fundamental observation from these slightly different angles, it has the opportunity to make more sense to you at a deeper and deeper level and more quickly than if you just hear it once from one perspective, and then you have to try and keep repeating that until it makes sense to you. Well, I was reminded of that as I listened to the replay of yesterday and Monday's the best of show that they put on Podbean. So whether you go to Podbean or you go to YouTube, um, you might benefit from listening to this. It might be things that you've heard Michael Ryce say dozens of times, and yet when he's pulling it together in a workshop like that, where he's trying to present the fundamental principles that uphold or that inform the reality management worksheet process, you're likely to hear things from a slightly different angle or a different example he uses or a different metaphor he uses, and it can help it make more sense to you at a deeper level. So we frequently have people that comment, oh boy, I know this is old stuff. I've heard this many times before, but there's just something about it tonight when I'm hearing it or today when I'm hearing it that um, I'm getting it at a different level or I'm seeing something different about it. And so the archives are a tool I don't think we talk about it enough. I don't think you probably can talk about it enough. It's another free resource that's available, not just um, for people who are listening now, but it's out there on the internet, and Michael and Jeanie are paying to maintain it and keep it available at as long as they possibly can. And I encourage you to make use of it, especially these last two shows that they posted from Michael. It's kind of the next best thing to being able to be in a live 2-hour workshop or 2.5-hour workshop, whatever it turns out to be. So we have plenty of time for comments, questions. We have plenty of people on the call. Thank you all for being here. Please feel free to unmute. I believe if you're calling in on your phone, that's *6. And if you're on your computer, you can just click the microphone. Did I see somebody unmute? Area code 541.
Good morning. This is Celinda.
Was that an intentional unmute?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, how can we support you today?
Well, I was so impressed with your dialogue that you and Susan had, and it brought up at least 5 or 6 different thoughts for me and references from my past, and I thought I would share them just for the fun of it, if you don't mind.
What aspects of the conversation were triggering for you? Or held the most meaning for you?
Yeah, sweet. The pearl in the pocket, the gem in the pocket that you and she talked about. I had an actual graphic physical experience of the pearl in the pocket, and I'd love to share it with everybody. When when my son married my daughter-in-law 4 years ago, his grandmother, Popo, he's half Chinese, his grandmother had given me, when I was married to his father, a really beautiful piece of dark green jade. And it was a round piece, and it was like a slice off of a round pole or something. But it was just this piece of beautiful jade. And I had saved it and saved it and saved it. And I'd realized that at the time they got married, that it was time to gift this piece of jade to Noel and Maho and return it to him, because his grandmother was his special, very special family member. So anyway, I had it in my usual saving place. And a friend of mine had given me a little tiny little Chinese bag, like you would put a necklace in or something like that, a dark blue brocade Chinese bag with a little drawstring top. So I put it in that little bag and put it in the box that little bag was in, stuck it in my top drawer, and I said to myself, now this is the safest place I know to put it. And when we go to the wedding, I will be able to gift it to him. And I immediately proceeded to forget where I put it. So I had just shown it to some people in the RV park who were rock hounds. And And I couldn't remember, I remembered bringing it back, but I also remembered having a conversation with one of the people, one of the daughter at my doorstep. And they had some kind of drug problems and things like that, which the mother was helping. She had, the daughter did, and that the mother was helping with. And so I, you know, what kind of came up in your conversation 2 days ago about one of the things you go when you lose the pearl of great price is you run around looking for it and thinking somebody else has it. I thought maybe the daughter had lifted it. But anyway,
Okay.
I looked and
So
looked
hold on.
everywhere.
Let me slow you down so we can follow this. So
Okay.
when you tell your stories, there are lots of extra words, and I think I just heard you say that you forgot where you put this valuable piece of jade, and then your
Yes.
mind started telling you somebody stole it.
Right.
Okay.
But then I thought, well, that wasn't what I was practicing. I was practicing blessing everyone. So 2 years later, 3 years later, after they're married, I'm going through my top drawer and I'm saying, what's this little box here? And it was the jade. And I just wanted to share that with you. I got the jade gifted to my son and my daughter-in-law and told them the whole story, and they laughed. And I just thought I'd share that because it was so graphic. It was so spot on when you and Susan were talking.
Okay. Very good. And what else was meaningful for you in that? You said there were 4 or 5 different things.
Well, I had mentioned to you last night in the support group about the when helping you is helping me, avoiding the Messiah trap. And
Okay. Now just say it the way the book title is. When helping you is hurting me.
Yeah, escaping the Messiah trap. That's the title.
Right.
And that one brought up the power person dynamic, of which Michael talks about the victim. You talk about the victim too. And the predator or the power person. You know, we can choose anger, or we can choose fear or pain or grief or whatever. Or we can choose anger and hostility, rage, actually. And I realized that this book had offered another possibility, which was the Savior, the Messiah, not the fixer, because a fixer comes from something's wrong with you, but maybe that's part of it too. So I wanted to share that, how powerful that book was for me to help me look at the whole Messiah concept. So that was the next one I wanted to share.
Okay.
And then another one I want to share was when we were talking about quiet, how to be an introvert in a world that won't stop talking. That book made me realize that when I took the Briggs-Stratton test, I was right on the cusp between being an extrovert and an introvert. And I related to both, which made me chuckle, because you've heard me say this and that more, and profoundly inclusive and all of those things on the radio show. And I thought it was just another indicator, because I've had so many in so many areas of my life, that the middle path is what really works for me. And it must be in my biology and my psychology and everything. So I thought I'd share that.
All right.
And then for me, and I know this is a little different perspective and experience than Michael's had about rage is a drug, but fear is a primary negative emotion. And I would say that they are the two sides of one coin. And for me, I used my fear as the addiction to cover my rage, rather than my rage to cover my fear. Just a moment. Anyway, and for me, it was very, very indicative that I would only go into default rage, the rage. I don't even think it was default. Default was my fear and my terror and my withdrawal. The rage was when the stress got over the top, and I was the one that held the power. And then I would flip into my power person. I was the one that I perceived held the power. And so it depended on whether I was perceiving myself a victim or perceiving myself as the power person. Either way, I was using my fear to cover my rage, because in my family of origin, if I were to experience rage as a little kid, I felt I would basically be dead meat. So I thought I'd share that.
Okay.
And go ahead.
There are a lot of people who have had life experiences that teach them that it's not safe to express their emotions, whether it's rage or disapproval at any level. So you're not alone there.
Cool. And then can you tell me the name again of the power of the victim position? I tried to look that podcast up and I couldn't find it. I'm going to try.
What are you mentioning? The power of a victim position?
Of the victim position, that podcast that Susan mentioned that she thought was so powerful. Maybe I should text her and ask her.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to. It's not ringing a bell for me.
Okay.
I think she was, I think she was talking about something else. Last night in the group, we had several books mentioned. One of them is the book titled Quiet. Another one is from Sally. She recommended the book Chatter. The subtitle is The Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters by Ethan Kross. And also from Sally, the suggestion of a book, What's in the Way is the Way by Mary O'Malley. And the last offering she had was a book by Mark Nepo, Nepo, titled The Book of Awakening. And I would just mention that when you were talking earlier, you weren't really talking about gasoline lawnmower engines. You were talking about the Myers-Briggs personality typology. It's not
right.
Briggs and Stratton.
Oh, was that what I said?
Yes. And so I'm just trying to clarify for people that Briggs and Stratton is not having anything to do with psychology. That's small engines, small internal combustion engines. And the reference you were making was to the Myers-Briggs typology, which is very similar to the Singer-Loomis. If you want access to that rather inexpensively, you can go to the book titled Please Understand Me, and it has a similar typology to the Myers-Briggs that is contained in the book that you can use for yourself to figure out what your typology might be.
Sweet, because it was very illuminating for me. It made a lot of nonsensical stuff sensical for me in relation to my behavior, etc.
Well, the idea behind the Myers-Briggs is that in total equanimity and neutrality, they try to assess by having the individual answer their own questions, right? So here's a questionnaire that you're asked to give answers to, and there are no right or wrong answers. But as you answer the questions, you describe the way you interact with life. And after you take the questionnaire, whether it's the Singer-Loomis or the Myers-Briggs or any of these others that are typologies, It's not there to assess any kind of pathology or any problem with you. It's just there to shine a light on what is your preference for interacting. And with the Myers-Briggs, the way I used to talk to people about it was there are 4 dimensions, and there are 3 rules that go with these 4 dimensions. The first rule is that everybody has access to both sides, both aspects of a dimension. So they have things like thinking versus feeling, intuiting versus perceiving, or perceiving versus judging, and introvert versus extrovert. And they draw these up on a line so that they look like they're opposite extremes. And the first thing they say is that each person has access to both sides of these equations. Everybody who is an extrovert can learn to do things from an introverted perspective, can learn to be comfortable in their own skin and having quiet time. Everybody who has a preference for evaluating things from a thinking perspective also has access to their feeling perspective in varying degrees. So that's the first rule. The second rule is everybody has a natural tendency toward one side or the other on each of these 4 dimensions. And the third rule they have is that the more you perceive yourself to be under stress, the further you move toward the extreme of either side of your natural tendency. So if you are naturally, you tend to be an introvert, when you perceive yourself to being under extreme stress, you get to the point where you don't want anybody around at all. You want practically complete isolation. And if you're an extrovert and you perceive yourself to be under extreme stress, it would be torturous for you to be alone. You want company, you want to be around a group, in a crowd, etc. So that's just the beginning of that. So what happens is if people are willing to take these inventories and answer these questions, they learn something about their natural way of processing information, communicating, making decisions, etc. And I tell people, think of it this way. At the top of the scale is the introvert extrovert. And one of the aspects of the introvert extrovert dynamic is where we get our information. I misspoke. Where we get our energy. So feel free to unmute, but I'm going to mute you because of the background noise, Celinda. So the first aspect, the first dimension is helps me figure out where I get the energy that I'm going to need to live life and make decisions and interact with people. If I'm an introvert, I gain energy when I'm in one-on-one, compatible relationships, or I'm doing something by myself, a solitary activity, meditating, reading, bike riding, whatever. If I'm an introvert, I can be with other people. I can even be at the front of a class, teaching a class or a workshop of, dozens or hundreds of people. And I can be busy all day around people, but I'm spending my energy doing that. And so as a result of being on all day interacting with people, I need to be awake and doing some activity that helps me in a solitary way recharge my batteries. On the other hand, if I'm an extrovert, I gain energy when I'm around people. If I'm teaching a workshop and I'm out at a seminar, I want to go with a bunch of people to eat lunch, and then I want to go out with another group of people to eat dinner, and then I might want to go for drinks or dancing. And whereas the introvert in that same situation can function quite well, but he or she might want to have lunch alone or just with one good friend, or definitely won't want to go out to dinner. And if they do, they're certainly not going out for drinks or dancing afterwards. They just need alone time, awake time to recharge their batteries. So on that first dimension, It helps me assess where do I get the energy I'm going to need to make decisions and live life. The second level, the second dimension talks about what kind of data I want to use to make my decisions. Do I want to use cold, hard facts, things that are measurable, things that are tactily in front of me that I can see and count them out? Or do I want to use the intangibles, the intuition? And it's okay, they're both valid. And remember, everybody has access to both sides of this equation. If I'm under stress and I I perceive myself to be under high stress, and I'm the kind of person who wants that cold, hard, I can measure it kind of data for my decision making, I may not be able to tune into any intuition or gut feelings at all when I'm under high stress, and vice versa. Now that I've got the energy to make a decision and I've collected the kind of data that I want to use for my decision, now I've got to plug it into some kind of an equation. If I'm on the thinking side of the next dimension, my equation is going to be all about logic, all about a logical structure and sequential thinking. If I'm on the emotional side of that next dimension, my equation is going to look like how does it feel to me emotionally? How is it going to feel to the other person that is involved emotionally, etc. And again, if I perceive myself to be at a very high level of stress, I move farther or further and further toward the extreme of my dimension, of my natural tendency. And I hope we've made it clear enough on this show that extreme of anything is not productive. It's not highly functional. The last dimension in the Myers-Briggs I talk to people about is, okay, so I've got enough energy from the first dimension, and I've collected the data I need to make a decision, and I've plugged it into the kind of equation I like to use, whether it's a thinking or an emotional based equation. Now, I that fourth dimension talks about, do I just do a quick assessment and make the decision and live with it? Or do I like to keep my options open, mull over, do some more research, maybe interview some more people, collect some more data points? And that's the judging versus perceiving. And so, again, if I perceive myself to be under high stress, I move further toward the extreme of my natural tendency. So the person who's a judging person who likes to just make a decision and deal with it and deal with the consequences and move on, they may be in the point where under high stress, they make decisions without even looking at the data. They don't even do the minimal data collection or assessment. On the other hand, the person who's on the perceiving side, if they experience themselves as being very high stress, they may not be able to make a decision to save their lives, to use the old phrase. They just are frozen, and their mind will be telling them, I can't make a decision. What if I make the wrong decision? And I'm stuck. So if you have those four dimensions, and those are just some of the basic aspects that get revealed from those typologies, it teaches you about ways to understand why you do what you do. And then if you're sharing your results with your partner and your partner has different patterns or tendencies, it makes it far easier within the context of the relationship to understand why someone's doing what they're doing without you taking it personally. And it might, if you go that next level, it might make it easier for you to facilitate communication with your partner, whether it's a work partner or a romantic relationship or whatever, because you'll be able to help them understand why you're doing what you're doing, and or they will be able to understand why you're doing what you're doing, again, without taking it personally. So There's no right or wrong for any of those typologies. They are simply descriptive, and they're descriptive of patterns which can be highly useful if people choose to tap into them and share their results and actively work to understand who they're in the relationship with. So hopefully that makes some sense. Again, it's Myers-Briggs and or Singer-Loomis, and the book that has the Singer-Loomis in it and talks about it is titled Please Understand Me. So here's hoping that made sense. I am requesting an unmute from Celinda so she can tell us if she has more to comment on with that or if those comments made sense. One of the biggest stories in my life related to that is that I was in graduate school and I got thrown into a situation with a fellow graduate student, and she and I didn't know each other at all until we got formally introduced in a meeting where we were told we were going to work together to run a group for the rest of that graduate school year. And she and I were going to be co-leaders of a very intense, they called it a personal and professional growth group. Well, it wasn't too long, as you might imagine. If you're in graduate school, the stress level's pretty high. I was working 3 or 4 jobs at that time, trying to make enough money to go through graduate school. And my friend Pat, that I was being partnered with and just met, she was a full professor at the community college. She was an RN, and she had 2 teenage children. So her stress level was through the roof. And it wasn't too long before, after nice pleasantries and a couple nice meetings, she was looking for things from me that I wasn't giving her. And she was thinking that I was completely disinterested in her and that I was ignoring her, etc. And it led to a couple blowups until finally she said, you know what? I think it might really benefit us. I'm hoping you're willing to do this. Will you take the Myers-Briggs and then I'll score it and I'll interpret it for you, and then you can see my results and we'll compare. And sure enough, it was probably the single biggest thing to save that relationship because we were pretty much on the opposites of every dimension. And if you're on the opposite of a dimension from someone, when they're acting in a certain way, it's very easy for you to take it as a rejection of you or as a rejection of your way of doing things. And hopefully I've made it clear enough in this short presentation that it's just about personal convenience, preference, etc. It's not about judgment. It's not about saying, you know what, introverts are the really healthy people, or extroverts are the really healthy people, or the people who are making their decisions based on an emotional equation are smarter than the people who are making their decisions based on a logical equation, etc. It doesn't work that way. This is simply a way to understand some of the basic functional dynamics of how we relate to the world. And especially on these 4 dimensions, where do I get the energy that I need to make the decisions I have to make in my life? What kinds of data points do I like to gather before I make my decisions? What kind of equations do I like to plug those data points into? And then once I've got all that stuff, do I like to just make a quick decision and move on and deal with the consequences? Or do I like to mull it over and keep my options open and maybe do some more research? If I discover those, and again, that's just one set of dimensions that are revealed. If I discover those styles related to my communication, related to my information processing, related to my decision making. It makes it far easier for me to communicate to people how I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it makes it far easier for me to understand them and and maybe why they're doing what they're doing. Again, without taking it personally. So, comments, questions, answers, testimonials. Doug, you've joined us. You're unmuted. Do you want to say hello? Do you want to?
I'll just say hello. That's all. I'm not prepared to say much.
All right, then just go ahead and if you would and mute yourself until you. And if you're on a phone, I think that's *6 is all you need to hit.
Okay.
So the background noise.
I got it.
Excellent. So, comments, questions, refutations. We've got about 18 minutes left to talk about whatever you want to talk about. If that resonates with you when we're talking about the Myers-Briggs or the Singer-Loomis, or we're talking about the book titles that were mentioned in the group last night, I'll put out in the air that Doug has let me know that Spotify is not keeping up with our we call it the archives, and that something happened as of May 2nd that was the last show they put on Spotify. Apple Podcasts is still doing it, but Spotify and Amazon and some others aren't. So I have put in a request to our technical team to see if we can remedy that. But wherever you are, even if you're on a PC, if you go on the internet and you search for Apple Podcasts, you can get the iTunes podcast player even on a PC, and you can listen to the archives from there. Belinda, go ahead.
Tim, Dr. Tim. No wonder I have had such an intense confusion because I'm right on the middle, and I can flip from one to the other in a stress situation. Also, I have noticed from Touch for Health and the evaluations that were given to me in that when I'm under high stress, every one of my sensory perceptions shut down. And it's like everything goes into lockdown. I can't communicate, I can't think, I can't see, I can't hear correctly or clearly, that is. And it's been very difficult living in my body all my life, as I imagine it is for a lot of us. But being right in the middle, where you can flip from either or at any moment, can be very frightening.
It is not frightening.
I can be very.
There you go. It is very different, right? It is different. And when you have really good, solid parenting, and you're raised in a nurturing, safe environment, and you download all of this sense of core strength and stability, then you can learn to use those differences, sensitivities, flexibilities, and they become your superpowers. And when you're raised in an environment where there's not so much stability and there's not so much gentle, loving support, then it can be part of what you use to generate hurt and confusion, etc. One of the things I want to mention as I was listening to you talk is that what came to me 8, 10, 15 years ago, whatever it is that as I was doing these worksheets and got introduced by Dr. Michael Ryce to the idea that overwhelm is not happening to me, but it's something I create inside of me. And confusion is an emotion that I generate, etc. The more I did worksheets on that, the more I was willing to just see whatever came up. I bumped into this realization for myself, and I don't know that this is true for others, but I do know that it's true for me, that When I feel confusion, the vast majority of times that I put it on a worksheet and work through it and willingly ask to be shown a different way to look at the situation, what I've discovered every single time I've done that is that I wasn't really confused. I was using confusion as an excuse to not do what my higher guidance was telling me to do. Every single time I've put it on a worksheet, I've I've seen I've let myself pull the veil back or let the veil be pulled back from me so I can see what I was avoiding that my higher guidance was telling me all along is what I should do. And one might reasonably ask, well, why would anybody want to avoid what their higher guidance is telling them? And my simple answer for that is because it may very well be the more difficult path. It may very well be something that in the short term requires more effort or is less pleasant. But that's for each of us to explore as we encounter things like emotional states that we might label confusion, etc.
I've had a little different experience. I really value what you're saying because it could be either or. I have thought, well, I'm just resisting, I'm just avoiding. And I came across the realization, and I say realization in relation to getting it on a gut level, after I had been told that confusion is a necessary state between old learning and what you already know and the new learning that you're trying to acquire. And that has been very helpful for me in getting out of my own self-judgment and being more accepting that maybe I'm just not ready. Is that resistance or is that inner wisdom? I don't know. I need to ask to be shown. And I need to get off of my own butt, so to speak, about judging myself for being wrong or not perfect or whatever.
Well, at
And
whatever
yeah,
level you can do it, let me interrupt you, please. Whatever level you can
yes,
do it, please interrupt your judging yourself negatively. I do not
right.
believe that you need to assume that confusion means one thing or another in order to give up judging yourself negatively.
Right. And also, I do not need to know whether it is resistance or whether it is wisdom. I can just ask and wait, because being patient is something I am learning. And the caveat is my husband is the exact opposite of me in his processing, in his personality and stuff. And now I can bless it because I realize, oh, what a gift that we give each other when we're willing to allow each other to be, and when we're willing to bless each other. And it doesn't have to be both of us. It just takes one to change the ground of the relationship or in whatever direction it's supposed to go. And I'm just very grateful. I'm very grateful what you just said for the whole hour, because I'm going to go back and listen to that. And I wonder if you have a recommendation for a book that would clearly explain what you have just said on the program that I could ponder with and look at, because I'm highly visual, and see if I can add it to the Singer Loomis or whatever you called it, the other tool, and that other book that you mentioned that I wrote down.
Please Understand Me is the book title.
Yeah.
And
yes,
that's the only one that's coming to mind right now. And some of what I just said may or may not jive completely with or connect completely with what's in the book, Please Understand Me. But it's it's good stuff even if they have a slightly different perspective on it. Because all we're looking at is, what can I learn about myself and or my partner if I'm trying to communicate that will make it easier for two of us to feel connected as we interact.
Yes.
That's why I
Yes.
present things like the Imago dialogue or Dr. Michael Ryce's responsibility communication or the art of nonviolent communication by Michael Salaberios. The fundamental goal behind those for me when I present those to people is to have the two people who are in that communication process leave it feeling more connected.
Exactly. Like I like to say, feeling win-win and owning it, both parties. That's my goal. Honoring each other's integrity and freedom, or like liberty, however you want to define it. Yeah. Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I want to say, for both you and Michael's benefit, and I will probably tell him too when I talk with him, and Jeanie, I always include Jeanie when I talk to Michael, and I include her in my thoughts, that I so appreciate when we have a difference of opinion, because even if I'm stressed, if I'm being 100% responsible, I'm saying to myself, I have something to learn here. Like, lighten up. Breathing is my big challenge. I always appreciate the reminder to breathe. And you're okay. And the situation is okay. And the other person is okay. And we'll get through it. So I appreciate you all so much. And I'm becoming to appreciate more and more when you disagree with me. I love it because it allows me to think and to stop and reflect.
All right. Well, that's going to be useful because I can just tell you from my own intention that the more I've done my own work and learned, the less often do I get into arguments with people just to disagree with them. So
Yay, and for someone...
if I'm disagreeing, another way to say that is, if I'm disagreeing with someone, it's never intentionally just to try and push their buttons. It's simply to present what makes the most sense to me.
Right. And I must share with you that for a person who wants to avoid responsibility, like having to be in charge of someone else's life, including their children's life when they were little, the other day, Larry and I had a different style of dealing with high stress. We were in Eugene and we couldn't find our way to a place that was time sensitive. We had to be there. And finally, I just said, your way's not working. I'm pulled off the road and I called the person on my cell phone and said, would you please bring us into landing? And that wouldn't be Larry's MO at all. He would just continue looking. And he had a sense, we'll get there. It's not a problem. And I was panic stricken. And I just decided to take charge of my own panic, which I would never have done before. I would have just blamed him if we were late. And I said, hey, wow, this is pretty powerful, just to be in charge of yourself, because I was the driver, Dr. Tim.
Well, and let me just clarify for you that in the context of this work, you didn't take charge of your panic in that situation. You took charge of yourself, right? And you did what you felt was the right thing to do. But in this work, we would say taking charge of your panic would be to cancel your goals and breathe and dismantle the false belief inside of you that you were using to generate fear and or panic. And, you know, both are good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they are decidedly different.
Right. And since I was the driver and I was in charge in that moment of keeping us safe on the road, that was what I chose to do.
Right. And it was the
for
right
me,
thing
that
for
was
you to
a
do. I'm just labeling it differently than you labeled it.
Label it one more time for me so I get it.
You labeled it as taking charge of your panic.
Right.
I'm saying you took charge of yourself. You didn't take charge of the panic. Taking charge of the panic would be going to its root and dismantling it. Sitting with it,
Gotcha.
breathing with it, perhaps even discovering through the worksheet process or the goal canceling process what it was in your thought that was giving rise to it. You
that I had to do
took charge of yourself
else.
And just did something differently so that you changed the external circumstances, which to some degree is the absolute perfect thing to do. And from another perspective, if you're talking about doing your own personal work, it's like taking a pill. It's like taking a Xanax rather than seeing the root of the problem and dismantling it.
And the result was an experience of where I decided that I did not have to please another person and do what they wanted when I needed to. I could make a decision, regardless of whether someone else agreed with it or not. And what was interesting, my husband said, "Well, you're the driver," which was very empowering also, I might add. Just to have him say, well, I think because he knew he would have done the same thing himself.
Well,
So
I'm glad it worked out well for you.
Good.
I'm glad it felt good and it worked out well and that you got where you needed to go safely and that you avoided some option that you might have taken in the past, which would have led to more conflict. So
exactly.
I will thank you for your contribution. I will mute you so we can wrap up the show for today. Thanks as always for your call. Thank you to everyone who's here. I just noticed that there's a chat. In the chat, Susan Bingham wrote, there's a YouTube video of Dr. Russell Razak, Razzaque, speaking on why Trump's victim position is so dangerous. And she can't remember the title, but you could certainly find it if you put Dr. Russell, Russell, Razak, Razzaque, and probably search for his name and Trump and victim, and you'll probably get several videos. But I will remind us all that Michael and Jeanie, I believe Michael is going to do a live show today on Needle to keep testing that platform, and we'll have a support group tomorrow, but not tonight. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff that we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Thank you all for being here. Blessings.